Welcome back to part 2 of the Everlasting Man Book Club. My name is Susan Sutcher. I am so happy to be here with you, along with my host, Joe Grabowski and Gretelyn Darkey. We are well rested after a beautiful conference in Philadelphia. We had an amazing time. We saw many of you there, and we were so happy to see all of you. We are so happy to have such enthusiastic participation in the book club. And we have with us tonight some new people who have never joined us before. So we want to offer you a hearty welcome. I am the local societies coordinator for the Society of GKC. I also write a column for Gilbert. I love spending time with you guys on this book club. I want Joe and Gretelyn to introduce themselves, and then we are going to get to some of your introductions too. Joe?
Sure. Thank you, Susan. I am the Vice President for Evangelization and Mission here at the Society for GK Chesterton, and also co-host with Gretelyn of our weekly Tuesday podcast, Uncommon Sense. You can find that here on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, or anywhere fine podcasts are provided.
Yeah, and not fine podcasts. We're the fine one, though.
Right, yes.
Definitely high quality podcast, that's for sure.
Yes. Gretelyn Darkey, Director of Development, and as Joe said, co-host of Uncommon Sense, the best podcast in the world. Besides this one, maybe. I don't know.
It's pretty good. It's excellent. So I am seeing people from California, from Texas. I'm seeing people from Illinois, Indiana. Hello, station wagon mother, you know who you are. Baton Rouge, which is about an hour away from our conference location next year, Michael O'Neill. So we hope to see you there because we are going to be, if you have not heard already, in New Orleans next year. And it is going to be amazing. We are going to have a party. Mardi Gras, they ain't seen nothing yet. When the Chestertonians come to town, we are going to light that town up. It is going to be great. So Arlington Heights, Tucson, Arizona, we've got Northern Virginia. We've got folks from all across the country and even across the world. So hello, my goddaughter there. Thank you for saying hi in the comments. Nice to have you with us. And so we are going to, we have an icebreaker. We love to have an icebreaker because we like to get audience participation right off the start. And tonight we're going to talk about what is our other summer reading. Okay. We took a little break. We don't have a Chesterton reading. We have an amazing pericope from the gospel that we're going to talk about. Maryland representing in the comments. I'll start off. I am reading Hilaire Belloc. I got this book. All right. Poor kids at St. Louis University High School. I don't know who was culling their collection, but they chucked a bunch of Belloc books, and I was fortunate enough to get them before they went to some recycling facility. And one of the one, I know, I was like, this, what? I mean, I had, you would not believe how many boxes I filled up and added to my already overflowing shelves. But this one's about Cardinal Richelieu. Pivotal historical character, and Price was right for sure. And so he starts off dissing scientists, which as a former math and physics major I found hilarious because Belloc is really good at dissing people, and that was fun. So that's not light summer reading, but I lost my taste for fiction a while ago. It'll come back. I know that's not very Chestertonian of me, but I'm just being truthful with you. So I see in the comments, Francis Brinker is reading Willa Cather's Prairie Trilogy, O Pioneers, Song of the Lark, and My Antonia. Gift of the Jews by Thomas Cahill. That sounds amazing. What about you, Joe? What are you reading? Do you have any time to read?
I do. I make time.
Great.
You have to make time. And
yes.
I have a lot of, I typically have a few different books on the go at one time and kind of, pick whether I'm feeling nonfiction or fiction. So I have kind of two right now. One is one that I read a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago, but a while back. And I wanted, for whatever reason, pick it up again. It's Louis Duval's The Last Crusader, which is a novelized tale of the life of Don John of Austria. A great book for young boys, I would say, and that's kind of one of the reasons I am reading it. I got a new godson recently. By recently, I mean hours recently. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
and need to step up that game of good recommendations for young men to read. And
Yeah.
then on a completely different level and note is DC Schindler's The Politics of the Real. I am to be fair, and I love DC, but I'm slogging my way through that one. It is not light reading, not beach reading, hardly summer reading, but it's my project for the summer. So
Okay. Well, I hope that you persevere. Good job.
yeah,
Yeah. And Louis DeWall, I think he's good for young men and for older young men too. He's good stuff.
it is.
Even
It's
the ladies like him. He's phenomenal.
yeah,
I've enjoyed so many of his, and I actually just ordered The Last Crusader. That was one that I didn't have, so we'll be reading the same thing soon.
excellent.
Historical fiction's on that cusp. I can handle that more than some other things. So
As long as
somebody
it's
else
good.
loves the Willa Cather trilogy. Death Comes Before the Archbishop, GKC's autobiography, The Shadows of Power, Collected Works
I saw
Volume
Man Alive in there.
3. Yeah.
Yeah.
Swiss Family Robinson.
Hmm.
Oh, some good books from the fiction or the conference table. Yes, get Louis Stiggs. Great fun and a good reading. Oh, that's great. Okay, and how about you, Gretelin? What are you reading
I've
this
lost my
summer?
taste for fiction recently as well,
Oh
Susan.
no, I'm
Well,
sorry.
no, it's not. It's not. It's the fault of the writers today. I tried to get back into one of my formerly favorite authors, and the characters just kept cursing, and I was like, I can't do it, which was a shame. But I am trying to get back into it with my kids because at least there are books that are safe,
Right?
safe reading. So we read Charlotte's Web, and
I love that one.
I cannot recommend E.B. White highly enough to anyone. I still cry at the end of Stuart Little and The Trumpet of the Swan every time.
I won't tell you
and
what happens at the end of Charlotte's Web then.
I know. Well, I did. We got through it, and I didn't cry. The other two make me cry. That one doesn't make me
Okay.
cry. It's beautiful. I love it. But yeah,
It is.
and we actually listened to it. There's a great recording by E.B. White himself that I highly recommend.
Okay.
Just gorgeous. So yeah, it's my great summer reading too. Very good summer reading.
Oh, wonderful. That sounds great. And I'm seeing A Gentleman in Moscow. I actually bought that one for my mom because it was recommended, and I haven't read it yet. But if she's finished it, I'll probably swipe it the next time I head home and maybe try it out because I heard that one was really good. So, working your way through localism. We had a whole panel at the conference of the authors from localism, and then they signed the book. It was an amazing opportunity. I know we've done things like that before, so maybe we'll have something like that in New Orleans. Who knows? Stay tuned.
And Joe and I
Yeah.
actually just interviewed Father Rainier, so coming
he's-
soon to a podcast near you.
He's phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's just amazing for many reasons. So that's
Yes.
going to be a great interview. I cannot wait to see that. Oh yeah, and the Sandanos, I just saw that. They came out on Tuesday. Phenomenal. Got to meet them at the conference. Just amazing people. You will meet amazing people if you end up coming to a Chesterton conference. I'm just saying. So so I see a little bit more here. Leaving Boyhood Behind by Jason Craig. Okay, he was one of our speakers, right? That was the Craig that was at the conference. And then The Crooked House. Oh, interesting. Okay. Very good. All right. So the book, we're back. Okay. So we finished part 1. All right. We've got the gods, the demons, the philosophers in the first part. So what's happened so far? This is an answer to H.G. Wells' Outline of History. So what's so wrong without reading like the 3 or 4 books that Belloc wrote about this? We could maybe summarize all that and say what was wrong with the Outline of History and why did it need a response? Do you want to start, Joe, with that one?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, Wells takes this scientific approach based on what was cutting edge science at the time, and Chesterton points out that science that's ahead of its time is often also ahead of the facts and ahead of truth and getting out of hand, and so Chesterton doubts that these wild speculations about, say, the nature of the caveman can be deduced from a single femur and a part of a jawbone found in a cave, for example. And so this is one of the things that he's criticizing Wells about, is that scientific view. but also that Wells discounts history in a major, or discounts religion, excuse me, in the treatment of history in a major way. And in addition to that, I think we could say he, in as much as he does treat of religion, he treats of it in the manner of scholars of comparative religion that make all religions equal. And Chesterton has quite a few problems with that. So those are, I think, those are the two major points that I read in that are direct responses to Wells coming up in the first part of this book. That you get the science wrong and you're getting religion wrong within history.
Yeah, I think there's a big challenge to the assumptions, the massive leaps and assumptions that Wells makes about particularly early man, and how people were and are, and just completely making things up, like you said, Joe, without the facts. Yeah, good assessment.
Yeah, and some of the things, as we pointed out in some earlier episodes, which I hope you'll all go back and see if you haven't finished them all, is this sort of psychological projection he seems to make about the old man. It's like, what happened in your childhood with this old man didn't let you play with his pipe or something? It was like, how are we deducing all of this from such limited evidence? That these men were very pugilistic and beat their wives, and this doesn't seem to be supported by the facts, because we don't have any physical evidence of that. So this seems to be like we're projecting some sort of baser nature onto these people, and without really, just assuming somehow that the trajectory of humankind is getting better and better, when, we don't even really see that generation to generation, that generations are getting necessarily better. We seem to be making the same mistakes all over again. So sort of a failure of logic. And then I did want to point out with the Darwinism that's in the sort of underlying scientific foundation of H.G. Wells, you really see, unfortunately, in some of his work, a very eugenic view of even human races, that some human races are more highly evolved than others, a very pseudoscientific approach to that topic, that really laid the foundation for some of the eugenic theories that underline the Nazi ideas. And so Chesterton had a visceral reaction to that. And I think that's also why he wants to take us away from that, because his objections to Darwin aren't just about the philosophy, but also about the really bad science. And he saw where that was going to go. He saw that if we think some humans are better than other humans, then we're going to start to want to subjugate them, or we're going to justify even terrible violence and horrors. And so he was really working, I think, to combat that was a big part. He did begin with the caveman. Spoiler alert, this next one begins in a cave too. When we get to the reading, we're going to talk about that. What a beautifully covenantal way to look at things, I think, where we have the old Adam and the new Adam, and the old Eve and the new Eve, is very much the Old Testaments and the New Testaments of the Bible. And then we're seeing that same type of relationship here, where we begin with, our first parents, and then we're beginning with Mary and Jesus in the new chapter. So I don't know. I think that was great. What?
Yeah. Well, and just talk about that. There's so many of these parallelisms that Chesterton engages in this work that are just so fascinating, and it's so well planned as an approach to his subject matter, because that what is very funny telling of the myth of the caveman, that he's this brutalist who smacks his wife over the head and blah blah blah, and then he kind of pivots that, and he says, if anything, we may have evidence that these societies were matriarchal rather than patriarchal to some extent. And then he goes to that all comes back around when you have the Holy Family in the cave, right? And the relationship of Mary and Joseph, you just couldn't draw a more beautiful contrast towards the what is said of the caveman and his wife, and yet in that family, there is also a sort of beautiful blend between a patriarchy that's definitely there, but also a matriarchy of sorts as well, at least in terms of the balance of holiness in the couple. So it's just it's this really neat symmetry, and I think one of the things that we'll be alert to as we approach book 2 here is those recurring motifs and methods of approach. Just watch for that, and I think it will help really unlock the book for us as we notice. Some of it might even seem at times repetitive, but there's a deliberateness to what Chesterton's doing there. So
I did think it was interesting too that part 1 is mainly focused on just like everybody. It's not necessarily like the Old Testament that is mainly focused on the Jewish people, right? It's very much like this is the kind of Gentile world that is ready to receive him, that largely did receive him at first. Just a kind of interesting observation that this is sort of what Chesterton is setting up for us in a very broad sort of historical way. Probably as an answer to Wells. I haven't read the outline of history.
It's
Although
not recommended.
I know. I kind of am getting curious. I'm like, is it the sin of curiosity that I even want to go there because it sounds terrible?
it's painful.
I have it. It's a little. I mean,
it seems like it's like a train wreck. Like, do I watch it or do I look away and pray for those
skim,
people?
maybe skim. I did get both volumes of it. I did have a good friend who pointed out to me that the first part is all about the babies. It just keeps coming back to the babies. This juxtaposition of, if you start worshiping nature, you're moving away from man, and this rejection of the incarnation. And so in the first part, it seems like it's all about the babies, and then in the second part, it's all about the baby. This one that came to redeem us, that became the baby, that is this baby that perhaps they've been trying to kill all along. This sacrifice of the infant is a story throughout the first part, and we'll find that it's even a story in the baby's life as well. The sacrifice of the innocents is a very important and pivotal part in his very early years. So we see that foreshadowing as well. And then we even see the echoes of that in our own time, unfortunately, as we're entering into another election season with people arguing about that issue and sometimes vocally supporting it in sometimes a very alarming way. So, so we're mirroring the Old Testament. We've got Christ at the pivot. Let's talk a little bit for those who might not have read the first part. And I want Joe for you to start with this, and Gretelyn for you to give your ideas. We've got God, the gods, the demons, and the philosophers. And it seems like we're going back and forth in these different phases. But if you could give just a general overview of that, I think that's going to be important for our understanding of the second part, right?
Yeah, it will be. And, this is Chesterton's, what he calls a horizontal, classifying kind of history. So he's not approaching history maybe the traditional way. He's not so concerned to delineate, how things move in time between, let's say, tendencies of henotheism and polytheism and so forth.
Tell me what henotheism is.
So henotheism would just be, it's a species of polytheism, but it's sort of you have multiple gods, but there's one god at the top. There is sort of
so like Kronos is the head of the Greek pantheon or something.
Yeah, arguably. It's sometimes often when cultures, when they assimilate other gods into their pantheons and things, but they sort of have this hierarchy and there's sort of a primary god. This is sometimes said of, by some biblical scholars of the primitive Hebrews of the Old Testament, that maybe that was their methodology. I don't buy that interpretation personally. I have never been convinced of it. But anyway, he doesn't take that approach. What Chesterton does is he sort of he takes the natural approaches to rather he classifies the natural approaches that mankind has always had to these questions of where do we come from, who made all of this, what is the meaning of a thunderstorm or a rainbow or whatever. And he basically says these are four categories into which those approaches fall: God, the gods, the demons, and the philosophers. And sort of he prizes, I would say, maybe two above the others in a certain sense: God and the gods. Right? There's and very, I think, quite uniquely, if not uniquely, at least in a very striking way, Chesterton presents this good paganism, as it were. You know, so he's aware of the bad paganism of Carthage, of Tyre and Sidon, but he's also impressed by and moved by sort of this good paganism of the household gods and and like seeing fairies in the woods and that kind of approach. And that's important. That approach to mythology and myth is going to be important. It's when it takes on magical thinking and becomes manipulative and wants to seek power over nature that it falls down into or descends into the negative form of that paganism that is the demons, right? That's when you start to run into the problems. So I think that kind of covers his distinctions. And one thing I'll just add to this for those that weren't at our conference, you know, Susan Hansen from the University of Dallas presented on part 2 of this book, and she sort of presents these four categories: God, the gods, the demons, the philosophers. This whole, why does Chesterton treat not just of the story of the Jews sort of approaching the moment of Christ, but he sort of presents the whole world stage, mankind as the whole, because he's sort of setting up a dramatis personae that are going to be relevant to this story, to the real heart of the story that he wants to tell, which is part 2 of this book. So you have to understand the totality of the creature called mankind, in order to understand the man called Christ, because all of those, the philosophers, the Hellenistic culture, the demonic forces of Carthage and things like that, as Susan notes, which are always present in every age. These are the characters that are going to be there, and they're going to be there right from the beginning, which is a little bit of a spoiler for what we kind of read in preparation for tonight. But yeah,
Absolutely. What do you think, Gretelyn?
Oh, I love letting Joe go first, because then he says it all so much better than I could. But I think the only thing I would add to that excellent summary is just the beautiful way that Chesterton shows that everything in two kind of ways is leading towards the moment of the incarnation, right? Both man is, there's a line where he says, like, man, like, this is the best we could do, is Rome, basically. But there's also an acknowledgement that we're also kind of like, is the best we could do, but it's also kind of like the worst we could do. So there's this point of like, this is the best we could do, and we're still also doing these horrible things that are terrible. So we both have reached our potential without God, and we really need God to redeem us at this point, or things are going to go downhill fast. So yeah, just that little caveat that's also kind of where he seems to have been pointing part 1 in order to set up part 2.
Yes, and we talk sometimes about the relative length of the Old Testament versus the New Testament. And the first part of Chesterton's book and the second part, that's an analogous length. And I think too that length and that going over again and again, it's creating in us a desire. Okay, where's the resolution? Because this is a train wreck and this is not getting better. And you keep reading and it's like, whoa, they messed up again. And you read about Israel and they go through the Old Testament. It's like, dang, another 40 years of wandering, another chastisement, another, this person's not reaching the Holy Land. This person, come on, like get it together already. And they try and they are faithful to laws and rules. And then sometimes they're not faithful. No matter how much they're faithful on their own, they just don't ever quite cross the finish line. And it creates in us, as we read it, a desire to find that fulfillment. And I think Chesterton does a good job of creating a desire to find the answer. He's posing this giant riddle that nobody can solve. And then he provides a solution in the same type of way. I think that's a juxtaposition to Wells's philosophy, which is that things are just getting better and better, and we're so great. And that falls flat. If you look all around us, I don't seem to feel like I'm living in some sort of heavenly existence. I've got, even though I have a great family and I've got, wonderful friends, I'm still, I see the struggle all the time. I see the pain and suffering in the world. So are things really that much better? Chesterton and certainly the gospel provide a more reasonable answer, I think, than Wells to that question of whether or not we are heading towards some sort of omega point or ultimate fulfillment of human progress. I think no.
We're heading towards something, and as I've heard once, why am I in this handbasket is how we feel sometimes.
Right. Absolutely. So the monotheistic worship of the Jews is a historic singularity different from all the other religions, unnatural or natural. And so in a parallel way, we're seeing that relationship with Jesus Christ. And so that's leading us into this second chapter. We've got this particular race. We've got this particular people that God's revealed himself to in a way that hasn't happened in the rest of the world. And within that context, we find Jesus Christ in our pericope that Joe chose. I think it'd be appropriate, if you guys are okay with it, I think we should probably read it, since it's shorter. And are you going to, I thought you might read it, Joe, if you're willing.
Let me pull it up real quick. I have it here.
Okay. I have it here too, but you don't have my readers, and I don't have long enough arms.
Yes.
To
I'm gonna read it, and this will be a nice exercise too, because I'm gonna read it in a way that I doubt most of us have heard. So,
intriguing.
From my favorite translation for just for the purposes of just reading. This is from the Knox Bible.
I was hoping you weren't going to say the Living Bible.
No. So
I'm just teasing. I know you like the Knox the best.
Yes. So here we go. We'll begin here at verse 18 in chapter 1 of Matthew's Gospel. And this was the manner of Christ's birth. His mother, Mary, was espoused to Joseph, but they had not yet come together, when she was found to be with child by the power of the Holy Spirit. Whereupon her husband Joseph, for he was a right-minded man, and would not have put her to open shame, was for sending her away in secret. But hardly had this thought come to his mind, when an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary thy wife to thyself, for it is by the power of the Holy Spirit that she has conceived this child. And she will bear a son, whom thou shalt call Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this was so ordained to fulfill the word which God spoke through his prophet. Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and shall bear a son, and they shall call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And Joseph awoke from sleep, and did as the angel had bidden him, taking his wife to himself. And he had not known her when she bore a son, her firstborn, to whom he gave the name Jesus. Jesus was born at Bethlehem in Judah in the days of King Herod, and thereupon certain wise men came out of the east to Jerusalem, who asked, Where is he that has been born the King of the Jews? We have seen his star out in the east, and we have come to worship him. King Herod was troubled when he heard it, and all Jerusalem with him, so that he assembled all the chief priests and the learned men among the people, and inquired of them where it was that Christ should be born. And they told him, At Bethlehem in Judah, as it has been written by the prophet. And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art far from the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee will arise a leader who is to be the shepherd of thy people Israel. Then, summoning the wise men in secret, Herod questioned them closely upon the time of the stars appearing, and he sent them on their way to Bethlehem, saying to them, Go and inquire carefully for the child, and when you have found him, bring me back word, so that I too may come and worship him. They obeyed the king and went on their journey, and all at once the star they had seen in the east was there going before them, till at last it stood over the place where the child was. Then, when they saw the star, they were glad beyond measure. And so they went into the dwelling, they found the child there, and his mother Mary, and fell down to worship him. And opening their store of treasures, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Afterwards, because they had received a warning in a dream, forbidding them to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by a different way. As soon as they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, and said, Rise up, take with thee the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt. There remain until I give thee word, for Herod will soon be making a search for the child in order to destroy him. He rose up, therefore, while it was still night, and took the child and his mother with him, and withdrew into Egypt, where he remained until the death of Herod, in fulfillment of the word which the Lord had spoken through his prophet, I have called my son out of Egypt. Meanwhile, when he found that the wise men had played him false, Herod was angry beyond measure. He sent and made away with all the male children in Bethlehem and all of its neighborhood, of 2 years old and less, reckoning the time by the careful enquiry that he had made of the wise men. It was then that the word spoken by the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and great mourning. It was Rachel, weeping for her children, and she would not be comforted, because none is left. But as soon as Herod was dead, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in Egypt in a dream, and said, Rise up, take with thee thy child and his mother, and return to the land of Israel. And those who sought the child's life are dead. And so he arose and took the child and his mother with him, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was king in Judea in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to return there, and so receiving a warning in a dream, he withdrew into the region of Galilee, where he came to live in a town called Nazareth, in fulfillment of what was said by the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene. All right, so a familiar story, I'm sure. And I did pick that, and I had a particular intention for wanting us to read it. A couple of intentions. First, that, like Chesterton, I think we always need to go back to the everlasting man himself, Jesus Christ. We always want to be centered back in the gospel. Chesterton was always thinking about God and the gospel, and so, we're going to read Chesterton and his sort of tale of the New Testament, but we want to go back to the sources and refamiliarize ourselves with those. But also, I think it's a good practice for us now to just talk about this story for the rest of the time that we have, trying to see it in a new life, in a new light, right? Put on our Chestertonian goggles, right? See a thing, he says in, what's the book? The Napoleon of Notting Hill. There's a law written in the darkest of the books of life, and it is this: if you look at a thing 999 times, you are perfectly safe, but if you look at it the 1000th time, you are in frightful danger of seeing it for the first time. And I think his whole methodology in the first part of this book is that familiarity breeds contempt. We're too familiar, we're too close to these historical things sometimes. We make presumptions about them rather than meeting them and greeting them on their own terms. And so what we need to do is to try to step back, stand on our head, do whatever it takes to see them anew for the first time. And so, reading this first couple of chapters in the Gospel of Matthew, what jumps out at us as maybe a new part of the story, or a part of the story that we forgot, or a part of the story that's interesting in a particular way?
I was talking to my husband about it this afternoon. That it's jumping out to me in all the gospel, but particularly in this passage, it's like very stark that if you hear about Jesus, you believe that he's something important, even if not quite God. There's only two responses you can have. You can want to worship him, or you can want to kill him. And we have those very starkly juxtaposed here. We have the wise men wanting to worship him. We have Herod wanting to kill him. And it's put it into perspective for me that, what places in my life am I worshiping him well, and in what places am I trying to kill him, to get rid of him,
Mm.
to not invite him into. Yeah, but that's echoed all throughout the gospel. But this time, I don't know, saw it really, really brightly, shining very brightly.
And I see that, but I'm also wondering about these people who sort of see Christ as like a pleasant story, and they're not seeing it in that way. It doesn't really have an effect. In our sort of post-Christian culture where Christmas means Santa Claus and a secular holiday, and we're not even really, we don't even think about the miracle or the young woman who birth or the Christ child who's come to redeem us, and or the horror of the slaughter of the innocents, or any of the things that we've read. I mean, really shocking. That there's a beautiful painting, and it's a woman. It's about the slaughter of the innocents, and it's a woman, and she's huddled in a corner, and she's grasping her toddler, and like, as a mom, I feel the passion of that story, and I feel that terror, that there's nothing you can do, and they're coming for your baby, and this is your life, this is the whole point, and then you juxtapose that with the people in the horror of the people in the first part of this book who willingly gave that toddler to be sacrificed.
Yep.
And it's like, how do these things both exist on the same planet? I can't imagine, because this is such a contradiction. A contradiction that one mother is huddling, trying to save her baby, and another mother is casting it off like it doesn't even matter. And it beggars belief. Like, I don't even understand how that is a thing. So I see that juxtaposition, and I see that we've neglected to be, like Joe said, we've seen this 999 times, and we've become immune to it. So how do we really bring this alive? I love that idea of like Alexio Divina, or trying to imagine yourself in a gospel story. Imagining yourself in the cave and smelling the hay, and the sort of sweetness of the smell of the animals, and that sort of like, maybe, animals don't always smell amazing too. So you've also got that, and you've got maybe a little bit of like water dripping down the stones of the walls, and maybe there's a draft coming in, and Joseph's trying to keep Mary warm, and there's just this beautiful image of this small little family and this giant miracle that happens every time we have a small little family, doesn't it? Godfather, this little
Yeah.
little amazing miracle that comes to us every time a new child comes to us. We're seeing a small piece of this miracle that happened in that cave, in a redeemed way, in a way that's somehow immune from the horror that we saw in the first part, that
Yeah.
somehow brings that, that redeems all of that.
Makes me think
Wow.
of Chesterton's poem, A Child is Born. Is that what it's called? I don't remember if that's what it's called, but that verse keeps coming up through it. A child is born, a child is born. And it's everything you're saying, Susan. It's just it's about Christ, but then it's also, to the woman who's has no problems in her life, she has this moment of pain, a child is born. To the woman who has only pain in her life, a moment of joy, a child is born. And there's all this. I'm paraphrasing because,
Right.
to my shame, I haven't memorized this poem, but it's a
We'll forgive
gorgeous
you.
poem. Yeah, it's actually hard to find the entire thing. There's a lot of cut down versions. It's very long. Highly recommend going and reading it, though. Anyway.
We do have
version,
the chat stream coming into our broadcasting software as frozen, but we have a couple of things coming in on chat that I wanted to share. And Judy asked or says that entering imaginatively, into the story, wondering what Joseph and Mary did with all the treasure, and Barbara points out that and Barbara Nagy says, I always thought Joseph financed the flight to Egypt with the gold, and that that is something that I know biblical scholars also kind of speculate that's sort of part of the providential purpose of the gold.
Mm.
There's a patristic tradition that these are three symbolic gifts, very poignantly so. That gold is representing the kingship of the new Messiah, the Christ. Frankincense, his priestly role, that he has come to render a due and right worship to the Father, and then of course myrrh, that he will also, in addition to being the priest, be the sacrificial victim, because myrrh was a burial spice that was used. So there's those symbolisms to these three gifts that are received. But yeah, these are the sorts of things that, as we look at the story, it's fun to kind of enter into, and again to see how we notice these characters in different ways, as Susan and Gretel and both have pointed out. This is the human drama in a certain way, and it's important. And Chesterton, I think, is really good at seeing the human side of the gospel, and that our humanity reflected, like that God came to us in a story. It's a true story, but it has all the power of story. It has all the power of narrative and adventure, and there's a reason he did that, because it gets us. It accommodates what he came to reveal to us in a very important way. I'll just say one of my main thoughts. It's not at all a profound thought. It's just something that I remember when I first made a close study of the Gospels way back when. You take for granted that you know the Christmas story, and you think of the figures of the nativity and everything, and then you read Matthew, and you're like, where are the shepherds, right?
Yeah.
They're not here. They're not in this one.
Yep.
And that's kind of, I don't even know what to think of that, or what I make of that, so much as that I think it is again very Chestertonian, that even you can read the gospel, but without all the gospels, the synoptics say. Even the story you think you know, or you think you know so well, you're maybe missing parts of it. You need to take the whole. You need to step back and remember that there might be things outside your immediate vision, right? Because if you maybe just read Matthew, you're missing the shepherds, and God wanted the shepherds to be there. They're
Right.
important. They're important. So, yeah, it's just a good reminder for us, I think.
And
Well, he
each
wanted the
gos-
shepherds there, and he wanted us there too.
Yes.
That's the other thing, is that we can enter into it, and we can be present, and also we can say with Mary, burial spices for a baby shower. Come on, guys. Like, that's a little bit intense. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
she has this great burden with her fiat of saying, I'm accepting this, like, be it done unto me according to your word. But that also means, like, whatever it is. I mean, the strength of this young Jewish girl to say, I am your instrument, Lord. Whatever you want for me, I will do it. That is heroic beyond belief. And so it begins with, with a journey to Egypt, birth in a cave, and then a journey to Egypt with a very young child. Some people say a little bit older, some people say a little bit younger, based on killing children 2 and under. But whenever it happened, it couldn't have been comfortable. And she obeyed her husband, who keeps having these dreams. That's a lot of faith. I mean, if my husband said to me, hey, I had a dream, let's go move to Egypt, I might not be as obedient as Mary. I might have some questions. I probably would not think that was part of the plan. So, it is pretty wild. It's pretty wild to think, that they were so faithful and just so trusting that God had a plan for all of this.
Yeah.
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 Sorry,
and
I
ahead.
just popped one up there and took it down. We'll get back to it. Go ahead, Gretel.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, just commenting on Mary, because I know we have some non-Catholic brethren here, and I hope we do. We love you. We're happy that you're here. Just a little insight on her that might help you, might not. I don't know. Everybody has their own complicated relationships with her, but if you truly believe that God created you and me and everybody else for a purpose for each of us, Imagine that God created Mary for this purpose. I don't know. It seems to help if you think, this is what she was made for. She just complied with it. So if we were all to comply with what God wanted for us, what would our lives look like? It's kind of an amazing thought, right? If we were perfectly in line with what God wanted for us, what could he do through us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah. It's this is a bit of a spoiler. It's coming up soon in this book, but there's this great line where Chesterton talks about, imagine a statue of infant. Like you don't have those. Well, we do. We have the infant of Prague, and there's
It's
lots
more
of
the toddler of
yeah.
Prague, I
There's lots
think.
of
Just saying,
yeah.
infants don't stand up
I
and wear
know, indeed.
robes.
Right, and frankly, though, I mean,
Is
let's
that?
face it. Just like
I'm
with
not being
just
too
like with
irreverent.
baby dolls, I mean, baby statues are creepy, right? They're in the uncanny valley a little bit, but like he points out that you can't think of one without the other. When you
Right.
think of the infant, it's being held by its mother, and that's how you're approaching. And there's something just profound about that I'll just leave as there's more to his insight, which you'll read in context in a week coming soon. But yeah, this is another just beautiful. We're asking folks to imaginatively try to read this story with fresh eyes for the first time. And Sherry Potter saying that Rachel weeping for her children, not one survived. How God weeps for us that do not turn to Him. Again, this is that story, for God so loved the world, and here he comes into the world. And right from the beginning, there's just everything Chesterton's been setting up for us in telling the human story, the paradox, the strangeness of it. That, right from the beginning, you miss this sometimes. I think you get through the gospel and you're like, there's enmity with the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees later, right? But it says right here in the infancy narrative, according to Matthew, that Herod, the king of the Jews, calls to him the Jewish scribes and the scholars and consults with them. And it's that sets up this sort of enmity. And whether or not they were complicit in it, whether or not they recommended, this action that Herod ends up undertaking, I think is kind of besides the point. The point is that it's the people that you would least expect to be expecting this, the people that you don't think are the ones going to be looking for to celebrate this birth are these wise men from the east, the pagans from among the nations. So just a kind of fascinating juxtaposition right there with this cast of characters that Chesterton has sort of set up for us to be on the lookout for as we start into this part of the story.
And what a beautiful promise for the rest of us that if we're honestly seeking, this is what I tell my kids, because, children are always on different paths with their faith, and some are just, they believe from the very beginning. And some people, it's like, you got to prove it to them. And I've got kids sometimes, oh, Mom, pray for me. Cause I don't know if I can believe. It's just so, I just don't know, and I say, if you're honestly seeking the truth, God's going to meet you. Like, don't be afraid. If you try to find him, you'll find him. He's not hiding, so don't give up and don't despair. God wants you to find him more than you want to find him. And so I have faith. I trust that, like the wise men who made this long trip, and, talk about their wives were probably like, what the heck? I don't know if they had wives, but if they did, like, you're going to follow a star and find a baby, like, way far away and not even in our group of people, and you think this is the savior of the world. That's a little crazy, but they believed it. They knew that there was something, and they were seeking truth. They were seeking it. And as long as we're seeking the truth, this is why I don't despair about people, even with a difference in belief. Okay, that's fine. Let's keep seeking the truth. I trust that God's going to bring all of us, because he doesn't love any of us more than any of the others of us. He wants all of us. He wills that all of us be saved. He wills all of us to know the truth, and he wills all of us to have a relationship with him. That's scriptural, and that is something that we believe. And that's something Chesterton's trying to show us, that this This little baby, even after all of this crazy disaster of the first part, has died for each and every one of those people and wants all of them to come to him, including us, who can find ourselves by reading the gospel in this cave with this little baby, this young mom, and this protector of a husband with crazy dreams.
Yeah.
It's
Oh boy.
beautiful. Yeah.
is.
Do we have any more questions in the chat over on the? I know we can't see them over here, so
I'm looking a little bit.
yeah.
Some folks have brought up the little drummer boy, also part of the
Oh,
story that is not present here. I don't think you'll find him in Luke's version either. He might be implied in John's. Let's allow for that, right?
John allows for so
I think
much.
everything's implied in John's, right? It's all there. The
Yeah.
cosmos is present. So
Right. John's my favorite.
yeah. But if I may, just because I know we'll have to wrap up shortly, and we have some admin at the end. Point of this exercise is, and why it occurred to me that I wanted to make this the approach. As I said, first and foremost, to foreground what this is all ultimately about, because we love reading Chesterton, but Chesterton never foresaw himself being read 100 years hence. The reason that he is read 100 years hence is that he points the way to the everlasting man, Jesus Christ, and people have found value in that. So we want to follow him and follow his example and always keep our eyes on the prize, so to speak. The second is to preempt a challenge coming into the second part of this book, to become, to have forgotten the imaginative methodology and exercise that he led us through, that basically the whole first part of this book has been practice for, right? Because the whole point of telling the human story in such a refreshing and new way has been to prepare us to now encounter this man, Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, and to see him with new eyes, and not to let the familiarity of the story, and it's especially dangerous for us who are familiar with that story, to not get it, right? This book probably does work better for a young atheist like C.S. Lewis than it works for, weekly devoted mass attendees, in terms of shocking us. But we have to really embrace that Chestertonian spirit of being willing to see the striking. And you could just, if you don't believe me that this is part of what's coming, just skim through the chapter titles of part 2. The riddles of the gospel, the strangest, story in the world. This is what's coming, and this is how we're supposed to kind of be approaching it. So I would just say keep our eyes peeled and remember that Chesterton's a mystery story writer too. That's also an important rubric, I think, for seeing what he's up to here. So, yeah, before we do any of that admin, just last thoughts here from our panel, because the chat, like I said, I apologize that it's slowed down. We'll have that back in working order, hopefully, for next week. But
Yes, I hope so. I think it's amazing and just so beautiful that in answer to the first part of the story that, that our Savior came as a baby, and the story begins with the baby, and not as a conqueror, not as someone who's already all grown up and strong and virile. It's this image that we have from Chesterton of these hands that created the heavens reaching up to the ears of the cattle. And that God is a conqueror in that he humbles himself to become one of us, and incarnation, and by taking on our flesh, he redeems our flesh. As it's just, this is a new thing. And if you really contemplate this, I can't help but feel like an excitement when I think of him taking on flesh to redeem my flesh. That's the greatest love story ever told. So we have something exciting. We have something beautiful. We have something to be proud of and to be telling people about. This is a miracle. This is something that needs to be shouted from the rooftops. This is something that no other religion claims. And this is something that there's nothing as life-giving as this, that God took on our flesh to redeem humanity. And so, it's the central mystery, and it's the center of the Bible, and it's the center of Chesterton's book.
Hey, well
Yeah.
said. Yeah, I have heard that the Hebrew translation of John is, and the word became flesh and pitched his tent among us, which I love. And I think of every single time I hear that, because it really brings it down to that nitty gritty, sort of earthy feeling of he's here with us. He's on the journey with us. We're all getting dirty together. Let's go.
Yeah. And gosh, we could go on again all night long. Andrew Wiskiman is pointing out the jokes in the story in the chat that God has a sense of humor. Bethlehem in Hebrew means the house of bread, right? So much of that in this story, and yet again to look for the unexpectedness of it, the shock and the surprise of it. That here are these wise men coming with rich gifts, and yes, the babe is under threat. But if you think of this story and just the way that the angels guide, and then if you combine it with Luke and you have glory to God in the highest and everything else, if you were living contemporarily with this whole thing and growing up with it, so to speak, and you met Jesus as an itinerant preacher like Peter, James, and John and Andrew do, you wouldn't expect that this ends at the cross, this story. So that's another part of this. That's apart from that little foreshadowing hint of myrrh and the fact that he keeps telling you it's going there, but you can't believe it of this guy. Look at what he's doing. So there's just a lot to unpack, and I can't wait to journey through this second part of The Everlasting Man with all of you, our friends. Please do tune in again next week and in future weeks. And I'll turn it over for the final announcements. Susan, if you want to close this out here.
Sure. I want to say thank you so much for joining us, people from all over the country and from our local societies, and folks who came to the conference and folks who didn't, the folks who are here for the first time. We are so glad that you're here. I want to remind you that our discussions are recorded and they're accessible online in the playlist. You will receive an email tomorrow morning with the link, and you can find all of the other ones. You can also go to chesterton.org/everlastingman, and you can find the link to all of the individual videos on there. Invite your friends to go there, invite them to sign up and join us. Our guests for next week, Dr. Ken Stortz and Steve McIntyre from his local society. This guy was the lead guitarist for Skillet, an amazing Christian music band. He is a doctor of philosophy. He is the president of the Visible Music College, and possibly his most important accomplishment is that he is the local society leader in Memphis, Tennessee. He is an amazing man. We're excited to have him join us next month. Next week. I hope you can join us. Chestertonians are just amazing and so much fun, as we remember from the conference. If you would like to support us, you can scan the QR code that's up in my little box here. And we have a Knights membership, which is our sustaining membership. That's how we do what we do. That helps to make sure that we can keep the lights on, worry a little bit less about raising money, a little bit more about reading our reading before we can, bring things like this to you. We got a lot of feedback at the conference that some people would like to see another book club after we finish this one. And, this is the type of thing that the society would like to do, apostolate, bring Chesterton's work and the gospel to people. So if that's something that you'd like to support, you can do so by scanning that code or going to chesterton.org and finding a link to the Knights there. And Gretelyn will be happy to help you out after that. So thank you again so much for joining us. And we'll see you next week. And remember that Chesterton is always better with friends.
So long.